Hi guys, welcome to another video for me. I know it's not professional, but I'm not a professional how to make videos, etc. That's being said. So, as you guys know me, I I'm a person. I like to be myself, to investigate things on my own, to learn. I'm a person that always learns constantly, and he jumps from fields to different fields, etc. Let, I just let it lead me where it goes. So as you guys know, I was in words, in languages. Then I came to and then in that field, language and words in a psychological way of human being brought me then into investigating and learning about the solar system, our planets, the sun, latitude and longitude, and the degree, and how time functions, and that there are several different times which we are not aware of. And so and then by doing all this, I really learn as I go where it leads me. And then I learned a lot of stuff in the physics. I came in from the planets and solar systems, and into physics, how gravity works, how you calculate a warped curve in space with the acceleration in space. And I recognized when I saw a typical space diagram, I saw in an instant that the physicist was drawing a leaf. And that's something very interesting, that I have discovered that I am capable to see things in those things. I don't know if that makes yeah. So anyway, so I came up by calculation and drawing solar system, calculating with sun, moon phases, and longitude, latitude, how gravity works, etc. Blah blah blah. I came then to a book, and I read it, and then I had an insight while I was reading it. I saw something while I reading it, that there was another message coming towards me while I was reading it. Like the same thing when I told you in a previous video, when a physicist draw a line, drew a typical space-time diagram in physics, with time and space coordinates and the acceleration, the speed. You get the sum of the distance. And when I saw how he drew it in the very first beginning, I saw that he was actually drawing a leaf, a real leaf. And I was not aware, and I was thinking about by myself, if the person who drew the time-space diagram, if he knew that he was drawing a leaf, if he's aware of it or not. But I saw it was a leaf, so I was investigating how leaves, the structures are, etc., the plants and what it needs, the light, how light functions, how shadow works, etc. And so I really go into deep, but very quick. So I don't have to go really in details, because I just flew it over, and then the important things I keep, and I let me lead to the direction where it leads me. So I came then across to a book from a from a physicist doctor. His name is Perry Sprouls, and he's the author of this medicine book called Image Characteristics and Quality, from Perry Sprouls, physics doctor. And a book called Physical Principles of Medical Imaging, second edition. That's the book he wrote. He's a physicist and a doctor, and I was reading the chapter contents. I don't like read every details. I just flow over, and the important things it keeps automatically in my mind, and what is bullshit or what is not important, it deselects automatically. So I came to that book and I was reading it, the book called Physical Principles of Medical Imaging, second edition, from the author, writer, Perry Sprouls, physics doctor. And let me read you real quick the content of the book, the chapter contents, and it's an introduction and overview. So the contents are image characteristics and quality, image quality, image contrast, contrast sensitivity, blur and visibility of detail, noise, artifacts, distortion, compromises, image viewing conditions, object contrast, background brightness, object size, viewing distance, glare, background structure, observer performance, true and false decision, human operating point, sensitivity, specificity. So those are the contents from his book. And I'm not a doctor, not a physicist. I'm just a part-time UPS worker, as you guys know, and I like to spend the time by myself because I'm a person who always wants to learn things and investigate it. That's me. That's my whole life. It always was like this. So anyway, so I read this book, and this book is about Physical Principles of Medical Imaging, second edition, from Perry Sprouls. And the first content is image characteristics and quality. So all that stuff is from the medical field. It's according all to the medical field. So everything what he wrote it according to a medical field, and he wrote it from a perspective, from a point of view, from a I got it right there. Okay, so the physical principles of medical imaging, image characteristics and quality through using computed tomography, CT, right? So it's I know it's very boring in the beginning when I wrote those contents, but what really got me is when I was reading it, overflow it, I saw somehow I was reading a message that came from the reading. It was another message that when I was reading it, and you can look it on the website, I can send you a link. When I was reading it, I thought to myself, so he's explaining how computer sonography works on a human body, how it creates images, characteristics, image contrast, contrast sensitivity, blur and visibility of detail, noise, artifacts, distortion, compromise, etc. How the computer sonography works on a human body. Technology. So I was reading it, and it starts like this. So it's what I want to show you now is this is all from the medical point of view. Now, when I was reading it, I didn't felt it from a medical field of view, because as you guys know, I'm a human being. I try to perceive it in a psychological way, in our environments, in our daily life, in our cities, in our daily life, because that's our content, right? That's our consciousness, our content. So I was reading it, and it starts like this. To the human observer, the internal structures and functions of the human body are not generally visible. However, by various technologies, images can be treated through with the medical professional can look into the body to diagnose abnormal conditions and guide therapeutic procedures. The medical image is a window to the body. So this is how he wrote from the medical point of view, right? Now, when I was reading it, I just want to show you how what I was reading it when I was reading it. It's kind of like uh, okay. So you heard his version. He's a physicist, doctor, and explaining it how a CT sonography works on the human body about image characteristics and quality. I'm gonna read it just again, and then I read you how what I was perceiving it when I was reading it. So he wrote, I'm gonna read it again. To the human observer, the internal structures and function of a human body are not generally visible, and it's all about image. Photo making image about a sonography on the human body. However, by various technologies, images can be created through with the medical professional can look into the body to diagnose abnormal conditions and guide therapeutic procedures. And when I was reading it, I read this, and this is no joke. This is just like how I think this is this is the level of understanding how I perceived it. So this is what I wrote. When I was reading it, this is what I perceived, and what I perceived, I just wrote it down. And this is in the medical field, right? So I perceived it in a psychological field. The human internal structure and function of the mind are not generally visible. The imaging system is your environment and your cities. The cities and its environment is a life experiment called imaging system. However, by various technologies, images can be created. The cause and the effect. The cause images can be created through posters, music, advertising, movies, news, headlines, events, propaganda, situations, opinions, movements, through which the medical professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, and others that we all have over the place can look into your mind to diagnose abnormal conditions and guide therapeutic procedures, which is the effect. So it's a cause and the effect. So let me read it again. He wrote it from the medical field, how a computer sonography works to create an image on a human body. He wrote, it is his writing, to the human observer, the internal structures and functions of the human body are not generally visible. However, by various technologies, images can be created through which the medical professional can look into the body to diagnose abnormal conditions and guide therapeutic procedures. And when I was reading his writing, I read this. This is how I perceived it. This transformation from the medical field into the psychological field, the understanding. The human internal structure and function of the mind are not generally visible. The imaging system is your environment, your cities. The cities and its environment is a life experiment imaging system. However, by various technologies, images can be created by cause and effect. The cause is, for example, posters, music, advertising, news, headlines, events, propaganda, situations, opinions, and movements. Those are the causes to create an image in your mind, through which the medical professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, and others that we have all over the place in the cities can look into your mind to diagnose abnormal conditions and guide therapeutic procedures, which is the effect. Right? And then he wrote, from a medical point of view, the medical image is a window to the body. When I was reading it, I read this. So he wrote, the medical image is a window to the body. And when I was reading it, I was reading this. The image that a human has in his mind is a window to his mind. right? So then he was explaining it how the CT sonography works, called the medical imaging process, which you see right here. I'm going to explain in a minute, and then I tell you how I perceived it, and I wrote it right down there, right? So, however, he says, the figure below is an overview of the medical imaging process. The 5 major components are the patient, the imaging system, the system operator, the image itself, and the observer, right? Now, and this imaging, medical imaging system, what she's explaining here, is variable with different parameters. So, meaning you can influence his image, the sonography image, you can influence it and through different parameters in the imaging system. The imaging system is the sonography, right? So he said. So he wrote the 5 major components for medical imaging process. The sonography creates an image and investigates an image. Are 5 major components, which is first the patient, the imaging system, the system operator, the image itself, and the observer. So when I read this, I perceived this. In the physical principles of medical imaging, there are 5 major components of the medical imaging process. The objective is to make an image or condition within the person's mind visible for the observer. The visibility depends on the characteristic of the imaging system and the manner in which it's operated. So we have the patient, the imaging system, system operator, the image itself, and the observer. Those 5 major components. Now let me go into this a bit deeper, into the 5 major components of the image in the mind of a human. As you see from the medical field, I transformed it in the psychological field. So first, patient. The patient, the object is you, each person in the city. Second, the imaging system is your cities. The imaging system is your cities and your environment and your daily life. And the third component, which is the system operator, however, they are operators, they can select and have access to different parameters, artifacts, blur, contrast, noise, distortion, of using it in your cities and your environments, in your daily life, to influence and operate and make adjustments on your image in your mind, to each person. The image itself. The image itself in your mind is your motive, your energy, your purpose, your opinions, your point of view. And the observer, which is number 5, the observer is another person, another operator, that looks at your image in your mind and interprets and analyzes your behavior, your actions, your plan, your motive. In brackets, doctors, families, friends, neighbors, etc. In bigger cases, or big cities, region, country, etc., I would say the operator and the observer working together. Okay, so what I want to say is that this is how computer sonography works and how the procedure, the medical imaging process goes. for the sonography technology computer to recognize the image, to adjust the image, to create an image, etc. So when I was reading this, I was translating this into the psychological in our daily life, from the medical field into the psychological field, which you see here is the patient, which is us. The imaging system is the city we live in, right? And here's the operator. So the operator has access to the parameters, which is artifacts, blur, contrast, noise, and distortion, to make adjustments to our image's mind, to the image in our mind, to adjust it, to control it, to create it, etc. And then there is also the operator on this side. He observes your behavior, your reaction, your behavior, your action, your plans, your motives, according to those adjustments, what the operator does. So I think that the operator and the observer work together. All right. Image quality. So let's go back to his book, what he's writing in the medical field, and then we go, when I was reading it, how I perceived it in the psychological field. And this is the deep understanding of an insight of things. So he writes then, the image quality. The quality of a medical image is determined by the imaging method, the characteristics of the equipment, the imaging variables, damn my English, variables selected by the operator. Image quality is not a single factor, but is a composite of at least 5 factors: contrast, blur, noise, artifacts, and distortion, as shown above. The relationship between image quality factors and imaging systems variables are discussed in detail later on. So that's what he explains, what an image quality is and how you can like it's the contrast, blur, noise, artifacts, and distortion, and the characteristics and the quality of an image and the relationship between these things. So let me see where I am. Where's my paper stuff? So when I was reading this, and don't always have that in mind, this is from a physicist, a doctor, and all that book is in the medical field. So what I was trying to tell you is I am capable to transform and translate it into the psychological field. I hope you get it what I'm trying to say. So image quality from his medical perspective, I just read, and I tell you what I was reading it. When I was reading it, how I perceived it in an instant. So image quality. So we read his image quality of version in the medical field, sonography, and I read the image quality, what we have in our mind. The quality of an image in your mind is determined by the imaging method, the characteristics of the equipment, which is posters, music, advertising, news, movies, headlines, events, propaganda, situations, opinions, and movements. And these imaging variables are selected by the operator. So the operator has control to posters, music, advertising, movies, news, headlines, events, propaganda, situations, opinions, and with those parameters, like in a music studio, the parameters, you can pitch it. He can influence and control and create the image in our human mind. So, and the image quality in your mind is not a single factor, but a composite of at least 5 factors: contrast, blur, noise, artifacts, and distortion. And I will go into it in another video because otherwise it takes too long. What it means. So the relationships between image quality in your mind factors and the imaging system, which is your cities and your environment and your daily life variables. So the image in your mind is controlled and influenced by your cities and your environment. We often consider at the image of a person in relation to its immediate background. Right? That's what I wrote. This is how I perceived it. Now let's go to the next one. And from I'm sorry. So let's go back to the dark physicist and doctor. From his book, he goes into it in the details. What are those contrasts and etc. So we have those 5 parameters. The 5 things the operator can operate with is artifacts, blur, contrast, noise, and distortion. So he goes into the sonography technology computer, and he explains now what those 5 things are, how you can influence, operate, make adjustments to create an image, to influence that image, etc. in a human body. And I translated in a psychological field, in our environment, in the cities, in our daily life, etc. So he explains the image contrast. A contrast means difference. In an image, contrast can be in the form of different shades of gray, light, intensities, or colors. Contrast is the most fundamental characteristic of an image. Contrast is the most fundamental characteristic of an image. However, image contrast, much beyond that required for good object visibility, generally serves no useful purpose and in many cases is undesirable. That's what he wrote about the image contrast of a sonography computer technology when he observed an image in our human body. So when I was reading it, I'll read it again. Image contrast in the medical field means difference. In an image, contrast can be in the form of a different shades of gray, light, intensities, or colors. Contrast is the most fundamental characteristic of an image. However, image contrast much beyond that required for good objects visibility generally serves no useful purpose and in many cases is undesirable. So I was reading it and I transformed it from the medical field into the psychological field. So when I was reading it, I was not reading it in a medical field, I was just reading it and I perceived it in a psychological field. So image contrast. Image contrast. This is how I perceive it. This is that's what I wrote down. So image contrast. Contrast means difference. That's what he says too. So contrast means difference. Color, race, culture, religion, Republican, nationality, Democrats, and all these groups, light intensities, shades of gray, etc. Contrast is the most fundamental characteristic of an image in your mind. An image in your mind will be visible only if it has sufficient physical contrast to your surroundings in your cities, reflections. However, in most cases serves no useful purpose, in many cases is undesirable. When a value is assigned to contrast, it refers to the difference between images. So thank you guys for watching. I just started with it, and just stay with me. I will do other videos to that. What I want to show you is that he was writing a book about how computer sonography works on a human body, how the imaging process works, and the characteristics to observe an image in a body, the characteristics, how to adjust it, how to influence it, how to create it, etc. And I'm capable of transform that into the psychological field of a human person and a human being in our environment. So the understanding is to transform from one field into a total different field, and there are similarities. Okay, thank you for watching. Stay with me, and I'm gonna make another video soon. Bye.